Top 5 transfer portal questions I have. Feel free to jump in or not, whatever you want to do. But these are just some of the transfer portal things that are still going on when it comes to some of the bigger names.
What are those?
That's the portal. Oh. That's where you don't know this, Smokey, because
like
you've never been in the transfer portal. Yeah. But when you get to go in it, that's what it looks like.
All right, that's very well done, Emery. I just had to be.
Yeah, he loves that logo. He loves it. He loves that logo. It's his favorite. Number 5. Will Evan Stewart take another visit? He's been to Oregon, and he's been very quiet. It's been very quiet around him, but he's been to Oregon, and I kind of think that he's someone who probably mapped this out a little bit tighter than a lot of people did. But he visited there. This would be a tremendous fit for him. And of course, anywhere is a good fit for Evan Stewart because he's such a good player. But for what they're trying to do and having him there with Dylan Gabriel and then Dante Moore for a year would be very exciting, I would think. So Evan Stewart's. Is he going to do that? Is he going to go to USC? Is he going to go to LSU or some of these other places that might be in the mix? I don't know, but I'm curious to see if he does or if Oregon's just probably locked him up right now. Number 4, how much money does Liberty have? We knew they had a lot, but Caden Salter going back to Liberty was a bit of a shocker for me because I thought he was going to try to get that big Power 5 or even SEC check and go and play for Hugh Freeze. Sub question: what does Auburn do at quarterback right now? Because the options for them are starting to dry up, and I'm sure that Hugh Freeze thought he had a really good shot at Caden Salter when he left, but clearly Caden Salter's changed his mind to go back and play another year for Jamie Chadwell at Liberty, which I do think had to come with some financial guarantees from the Liberty people. But that was a bit of a shocker over the weekend to see Caden Salter withdraw his name from the portal.
Yeah, I think there's probably something at play that we don't know about. I mean, for him to just abruptly, he was in there for like a week, maybe. Mm-hmm. I mean, if he did that, I don't know. It felt like he was barely in the portal whatsoever. So maybe the market wasn't what we thought it would be for him. And what did I say last week? And I don't know this to be true at all, but I said the one thing that I do wonder about him is if there's any questions, it's that they played a really light schedule. Yeah. But, he had the talent. It's not like he suddenly was like some star player. Like, he was a 4-star guy coming out of high school, but he also had some issues at Tennessee. And I just wonder, is that something that scares people off, or is it just something, is it something that people are unsure about? I don't know. But it's not like he was just like some stud, no questions whatsoever. Boom, he's in the portal. Like, I could see where there's some teams that might go, you know what, like maybe it was the competition, or maybe we don't trust the off the field yet, or maybe, and so I don't know what it was ultimately, but he was not in there for very long, and I can only think that means either Liberty ponied up and gave a huge NIL deal or something, or maybe there just wasn't the interest level that I assumed that there probably would be for a guy who originally went to Tennessee and then had a pretty stellar year for Liberty this past season. So not quite sure. Maybe I'll find out in a couple nights because I think he's going to be at the banquet that I go to as one of the finalists there. But, yeah, I was surprised to see this, and I'm very interested to know what kind of interest there was in Caden Salter in the transfer portal for as brief a stay as he had.
While you brought that up, Craig, the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award banquet is coming up on Wednesday night. Caden Salter, Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Milroe, and Ollie Gordon are the 4, I believe, that will be.
There's a 5th that you're missing that now I can't think of it. Ollie Gordon, Jalen Milroe.
Oh, Gente.
Ashton Gente from Boise State. Yeah.
But that's a tough class to try to pick out who's going to win. They're all very deserving. Number 3, how big of a school is Quinshon Judkins looking for? Craig and I, Smokey, talked about this last week, and that Ole Miss is going for it. I mean, they just got Diego Pounds, as a matter of fact, out of the transfer portal, a left tackle from North Carolina, really good player coming there, and so they're going for it, but apparently Quinshon Judkins thought, well, I'm going to go for it myself. He visited Ohio State this weekend. He was there. So that would kind of like fit what we were talking about, Craig, in if you're not going to stay at Ole Miss when they're clearly outlaying a bunch of NIL funds and getting aggressive to get guys in there, how big are you shooting for? Ohio State, something like that. But yes, Quinshon Judkins at Ohio State. I wonder where else he visits, if anywhere, in looking for that. But this is a dude who is when it comes to the transfer portal, it's surefire a fit for anyone as it can be. The second leading rusher in the SEC, the first player since Herschel Walker to rush for 15 touchdowns in each of his first 2 seasons. So this is a stud now that is going somewhere else. But we were curious as to how big of a spot he was looking for, bigger than Ole Miss and what they're doing. Obviously, they've not won the SEC, so he's going big, and Ohio State's the first stop on his journey.
Yeah, and I want to make mention, too, I don't think I mentioned it with Salter, is like one of the rumors that was out there was that they didn't have his degree, which I don't know. So like I said a moment ago, I just want to throw that in there in the mix as well. It could be a variety of different reasons for why, but I am curious to know which one it is for why Salter jumped back in the portal. But that's why he apparently may not have ended up at Auburn. Who the heck really knows, though? But with Judkins... I mean, there's not many options. Ohio State would certainly check that box, though. I mean, there are plenty of schools that are bigger, better, badder, more historic than Ole Miss. Not a ton, but there are more than a few. But the combination of what you would think that they would have NIL-wise, the ability to play in the SEC and just finish out your career where you started it, knowing you're going to be a major focal point, knowing they're retooling and spending out the wazoo to get your defense better, to help make you better and be a national championship contender. I mean, how many spots offer all those different things? And there's not many, but Ohio State is certainly one that can offer you all that and then some. So, I could see that, but there's not much longer of a list. You go like, what's a true step up from the situation you're in? So, that would make some sense.
Number 2, this is maybe more of a Miami question for anything, but what happens if Taulia Tagovaiola does not get his year 6, which, I have no reason to believe that he won't. I mean,
I do. It's the fact that he played in too many games.
Yeah, eventually, don't they need to say enough is enough?
But again, like, they keep trying and they keep losing.
But, Paul, if they do that, that opens up the door for everybody that played in 5 games.
Yeah.
So, like, how many people do you think redshirted or didn't redshirt because they played in? So that's I get what you're saying. They don't do anything. But they do. We just don't ever give them credit when they do, and it's so few and far between that we just don't even realize it because it gets drowned out by all the things they don't do with the NCAA. But if you say, you know what, you did play over the redshirt threshold, and it wasn't because of anything other than really mismanagement as much as anything, he shouldn't have played in a 5th game. If you're going to cite that and Alabama's giving you the support, okay, but I just think that opens Pandora's box of like, well, where does it stop then? Because this guy could say, well, I was at this school and I played in 5 games and I should now deserve a bonus year. And then everybody who played in 5 games deserves a bonus year. Now, maybe that's 5 guys across the country for all I know. Maybe that's not that big of a deal, but I just think that would be a really bad precedent to set. But then again, it's the NCAA, and I know that's where you're coming from, so I get it.
It's almost like they were going to say you couldn't transfer a second time. Remember that like 2 or 3 weeks ago? And then, no, you can transfer, and you can transfer again next year. I understand what Craig's saying because it's true. But
I get there has to be a line, but
seal the damn deal, and here's the end line here.
Yeah, there does, but like again, if they buy his argument, and Alabama and Maryland are clearly supporting him in this.
No,
that's the other thing is that. I don't know. If he doesn't get year 6, I guess the other part of it is, all right, well, then what's the next lawsuit? I don't think he's really going to die on that hill. He'll just go to the NFL, but It's
a rule, though. It's a rule. You played in 4 or less, and let's not act like it's a bad rule, too. It's like you had this rule come into play a few years ago where you can get freshmen or whoever into the game and still maintain their red shirt, so now we're just going to throw that to the wayside? Where does it stop where... No, you actually can't do this. There's got to be something where there's not a fight over it or eventually the player gets their way. And I'm all for the player getting their ways in a lot of these topics because it was long overdue. But, damn, man, rules are rules eventually, and you have to, force them. So, if they do give him a year 6 because they're like, well, it's not your fault, it's the staff's fault, then maybe I'm overblowing it and there's 2 guys that would be able to then claim they need a waiver to get their year back. But it just seems like it'd be a bad bad thing to walk back.
Yeah, I'm still like wondering in Alabama's thing when he got to that 5th game and he's like, well, we like to take the knee. Be like, no,
Exactly.
have anybody else do it.
I saw an article say, well, technically he played it. No, he didn't. He played in 5 games.
Yeah.
He played in 5 games, whether it was for a play or it was a dozen. He played no technically about it, and it's not technically the rule. No, the rule is you play in 4 or less, and you maintain your red shirt. And he played in 5, and so that's what I was saying on Friday of like, who was the staffer at Alabama, or was the staff idea that, well, he's not going to be here for 4 years anyways. He's going to be in the NFL, so let him play, and the red shirt won't matter in the long run. I don't know, but that was fumbled by whoever was in charge of the eligibility decisions there, whether it be he himself or whether it was the Alabama staff. But, in hindsight, being 2020, they screwed that up.
Yeah, this is really bad. But I was going to say this about Miami, but I guess I already have their answer in Reese Poffenbarger. So
not if he's available. Not if Taulia's available.
But if he's not, then they've at least done what they set out to do, which is get a transfer quarterback, and one with interesting potential, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, they got to the FCS semis. Mm-hmm. He had nice numbers. I don't think he's the next Cam Ward, but I know somebody in the chat pointed out took Cam a couple years. He was very good in his first year too.
Yeah.
He was very good in his first year, but I don't know. That's a very interesting question here and a very interesting ruling, but it would appear that Miami's at least somewhat addressed it, if not all the way addressed it. But yeah, if a guy like Tagovaiola becomes available, then I think, hey, Reese, you have a little competition this spring, or maybe there's somebody else we're not thinking of.
He's only going to be here for a year. Hope you're here longer than that. No,
there you go.
And number 1. Malchi Nelson to Boise. This one, and great for Boise to get a guy who was the number 1 or number 2 quarterback on everybody's boards. But, Garrett and I were talking about this when I got in today. Sometimes, and I don't know if this is true for Malchi Nelson because he grew up in LA, but sometimes, that vibe isn't for you and you find out it's not and you want to go someplace that's maybe a little more personal and localized. And Boise State is certainly that. I mean, it's not certainly, USC.
It's not Los Angeles.
It's not Los Angeles by any stretch of the imagination. And look, Randy Johnson didn't like pitching in New York. It just wasn't his vibe. It didn't make him any less of a player or anything like that. It was just, he didn't like pitching in Yankee Stadium. It didn't work out well for him there. And maybe Malchi Nelson just wanted something different than the bright lights of USC. But it's still really surprising that, this is a dude who's a 5-star quarterback and number 1 and number 2 overall prospect in the country, and then winds up at Boise State a year later. Still kind of surprising, but great for Boise State to get a guy that's this talented.
Well, the first thing I'll say is, what else is great is a guaranteed starting quarterback job.
Yeah.
That's really great, too. And after USC's bowl game, I don't think that was necessarily in the cards for Malchi Nelson.
Yeah.
Based on their depth chart this year, it wasn't. So I think that speaks to the appeal as much as anything else does with him. But, yeah, I mean, that's a really good get. He's from Los Alamitos, so I don't know how that stacks up in terms of, towns and how big that is compared to Boise and all of that, but I think it's as much that, you've got a job availability there and a really good program. Not sure about all his relationships behind the scenes and things that work there, but it was surprising to see him move so quickly just from an outside observer point of view and land at Boise State when the thought obviously immediately goes to, all right, well, what other Pac or Big Ten or SEC schools he going to end up going to, being such a formerly highly rated guy. But that was a surprise to see Boise, and I guess the biggest surprise was to see how quickly it moved. But a great get for the Broncos. They got a new staff and a new era kicking off with a pretty big time player and the highest rated guy they've ever had in that program's history. So there will be some fun things to watch out there in Idaho for the Broncos.